there, I'm Scott, and this is GreatScott Knitting, and this is day 2 of Passover for the Jewish community. And here we are again. So there was a couple other things I wanted to talk about in terms of the Seder. Number one, a lot of folks in the Jewish community celebrate two Seders. They celebrate first night, which was last night, and then tonight again. And that comes from a tradition of the Jews that were living outside of Israel for, 1,000, 2,000 years, since the destruction of the Second Temple. The holidays, especially the big holidays, were always marked from the new year, or not the new year, but the new moon, which started the month. And they would always have someone that would mark when the new month began by seeing the new moon in Israel, in the land of Judea. So when the peoples were living in the diaspora, outside of Israel, they didn't know when the new moon started in Israel and was sighted in Israel. So they instituted, that it would be one of 2 days. So hence we celebrate major festival days twice, day 1 and day 2, to make sure that we don't miss it. So, therefore, outside of Israel, there is 2 Seders, night 1 and night 2, or first night and second night. First night is usually the intimate family, close friends. Second night, it may be also intimate family and close friends, but first night tends to be a bit more serious, and the second night, it could be a little more light, a little easier. In some communities, the first night is, of course, intimate family and friends, and the second night is a community Seder, where you share it with folks around the community, the Jewish community, and oftentimes including folks from outside the Jewish community. So it can be really ecumenical, if you will. So it's kind of a nice tradition to sort of keep that up, even though we know when the Jewish months begin. We are in the modern world, however. But, it's kind of a nice tradition to have, to keep a hold of some of those things that our ancestors have long held as important. One other thing, and this is the thing that one of the things that, as someone who now, for my household, I do the cooking, and so I prepare the meal and all of the ritual foods that go with it. And there are a lot of ritual foods that go with the Seder. I don't make my own matzah, by the way. I do purchase that. That has to be rabbinically overseen for Passover. But some of the things that I do make, are the main meal pieces. But there is one symbolic ingredient to the Seder plate, the Passover plate, which kind of has all of the symbols of the feast placed on one plate. And one of those symbols is the symbol for the mortar that the Jewish people created when they were building the buildings for the Egyptians. We often see those pictures, in the cartoons or in the movies of the Jewish people slaving in the mud pits making bricks. Well, that's what we're talking about, is that mortar that made the bricks. We actually have a dish which is meant to symbolically represent that. And it's called charoset, which as a dish, as a something that you eat, is made from ground up nuts and apples and raisins or dates, usually some honey, some wine, maybe a little bit of salt, and usually some spices like cinnamon. So I usually make mine from almonds and apples, raisins and cinnamon, some honey, a little dash of wine, mixed all up together, ground up together to some extent, with some chunks of apples still there, so you can really kind of see it, because you don't want it pasty. You don't want it like applesauce. It's more gritty, like it's sandy. So let me show you what that looks like. So that's what haroset looks like. Looks like a gritty thing, kind of like putty, if you will. Some people make theirs much more chunky than mine, but I like the way I have mine. So this is one of those dishes that before I began walking my life as a Jewish person, I had no idea about, never heard of it, never tasted it, never seen it, had never heard it spoken of. And yet it is one of my favorite things about the Seder meal. And it's one of the favorite things I like about preparing the Seder meal, is that is one of the things that, for the person who is preparing that meal, that is one of the few symbolic things that they make. All of the other things are kind of made for them. I mean, there's a roasted egg, which, yeah, you have to boil it and then char the outside of it so it looks like it's been roasted. You have a shank bone, which you probably have cooked some kind of meat and then removed that meat so you have a bone that you can place on the Seder plate. You've harvested some bitter herbs, maybe some romaine lettuce. So those are some of the things that are, and then a green vegetable, but those aren't really something you do a lot of work to prepare. The haroset, however, there are many recipes out there and lots of different styles. And so it's a very, very personal, very interesting thing that I think the cook for the meal has kind of a big responsibility for. Because not only is it a representation, it is something that is also eaten as an aspect of a requirement for meeting the necessary aspects of the Seder. And the Seder is meant to tell the story. But in that story, you're also supposed to experience the bitterness by eating bitter herbs. You're supposed to experience the haste by eating matzah, an unleavened bread. And there was a Rabbi Hillel, who said, in order to certify that, to make certain that you have met all the requirements of having celebrated the Seder, to do a sandwich where you take the matzah, you put in some bitter herb, you take the haroset to bind it together, and you eat then the matzah and the bitter herb with the haroset, which kind of represents the story, the laboring in Egypt. And you put those together and you eat them all at once, right before the Seder meal is served. So it's kind of like an odd appetizer, of which you use the meal to sort of wash the taste of it out of your mouth. But that being said, I like haroset, and I actually make enough so that I can enjoy it all through the week as I continue to celebrate. So those were just a couple of things that I wanted to share about Passover, the Passover Seder. Passover is the first of three major festivals for the Jewish community. There are three major festivals which are called the pilgrimage festivals. Pilgrimage meaning those were the festivals that someone from your family or if not the whole family, was required to make pilgrimage to Jerusalem to make sacrifices and to celebrate that holiday there. And there were 3 times a year you did this. And they, of course, early Jewish people were very agrarian. And so these were basically holidays around either planting, bringing early harvest, or bringing the late harvest. And so these 3 holidays really kind of fall around the planting season for Passover. Then there is a period of time, and then we come to or sort of maybe an early harvest celebration called Shavuot. And I'll talk a little bit more about Shavuot because it's really important to the topic for this little venture. And then the last one is called Sukkot, which is in maybe late September, but usually in the middle of October. And that is really a sort of a late harvest festival, very Thanksgiving-y, if you will. And so those are the 3 big pilgrimage festivals. So the first one here is the Passover festival, where we celebrate our freedom from Egypt. Now, between Passover and Shavuot, which Shavuot is the celebration or the commemoration of the giving of Torah, when the Torah was given to the Jewish people, and the Jewish people accepted it as their book, as their law. So there's a period of time between those 2 holidays called the Omer. It's really not a period of time. Omer is a Hebrew term which actually is a measure of grain. And this is the measure of grain that would be sacrificed or taken to the altar the day after the Passover meal, so today. And then the commandment in Torah is that you count the days between the Passover and Shavuot. There are 49 days, which equals 7 weeks. And the 7 weeks, of course, have 7 days. So 7 times 7, 49. Kind of a holy number, which takes us to Shavuot, which is on the 50th day, which has some ramifications of importance to the Christian world, because that is the day of Pentecost. It is the 50 days following the eating of unleavened bread, which was the Last Supper. So there was that 50-day period when, supposedly the Holy Spirit came down and embodied the disciples, giving them certain gifts. So there's that sort of Christian connection from my former religious path. But anyway, Shavuot, the term Shavuot comes from the word Shavua, which means week. So the week, the weekday, the 7 days together is called a Shavua. So Shavuot means weeks, 7 weeks to be exact. So it's the culmination of this 7-week period between Passover and the giving of Torah at Sinai. So the story goes is that during that 7 weeks, the Jewish people were preparing, as they went to Sinai, they were preparing themselves to receive the law. Preparing in sense of getting used to not being slaves and getting used to the concept of being free and a people in and of themselves. So that's what sort of all that's about. So there is a commandment that starting tonight at sundown, we count the Omer. And it's basically just that. We bless the counting of the Omer, then we count the Omer. And that goes something like this. The blessing would be Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al Sfirat HaOmer, which basically means, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us with commandments and commanded us concerning the counting of the Omer." And then let's actually count the Omer now. And for tonight, that would be Hayom Yom Echad La Omer, which basically says today is one day of the Omer. Now, there are 49 of these days, and we count them pretty much like that every night. Bless it, count it, move on. Now, Kabbalah, which is basically Jewish mysticism, religious mysticism, assigns topics or characteristics to each day that you meditate on. And they range from topics and concepts like loving kindness, justice, compassion, things along those lines. So every day of the week, we focus on one of those characteristics. And every week is a focus on that characteristic. Let me kind of show you what I mean by that. One moment. Okay, so if you see here is each week. And so week 1, we're focused on loving kindness. Well, on the first day of the week, we also focus on loving kindness, but it kind of goes in sort of this way. What is the loving kindness of loving kindness? Like, what is the love in love? What is the kindness in kindness? And then the next night would be, what is the discipline in loving kindness? The third night, what is the compassion of loving kindness? And so on, day by day. You consider different characteristics of loving kindness. Next week, we'll consider different characteristics of justice and discipline, and so on, throughout the 49 days of the Omer. Anyway, I hope that kind of gives you kind of a sense. So for today, we're talking about the loving kindness of loving kindness. In Hebrew, it's the chesed of chesed. So as a meditation, here's a passage that I'll read for you. Love is the single most powerful and necessary component in life. It is both giving and receiving. Love allows us to reach above and beyond ourselves, to experience another person, and to allow that person to experience us. It is the tool by which we learn to experience the highest reality, God. Examine the love aspect of your love. Ask yourself, what is my capacity to love another person? Do I have problems with giving? Am I stingy or selfish? Is it difficult for me to let someone else into my life? Am I afraid of vulnerability, of opening up and getting hurt? So for the exercise of the day, find a new way to express your love to a dear one. Kind of like the love language, what is your love language? What is theirs? Do they come together? For those of you who have ever read the 5 languages of love, that just kind of came to mind. But what is love? What is it loving to love another? Is it kind to love another? Is love kind? Those are some interesting questions to consider introspectively on this day. So that's what counting the Omer is about. And so every night this week, I will count the Omer with you. So yeah, there's that. So I do want to share knitting with you. I have made some progress on my sock. So I'll share that with you here. So boom. there we are. And so my goal is to move from where I am here to the end of the sock. Here's the toe. So the leg will come up to this point, and then I'll have a 2-inch cuff at the top, and this sock will be finished. I have until Tuesday night to finish this. I think I can get that done. So that is my biggest goal. Also in the fiber related world, I did some work today. Of course, I just couldn't resist. They came in on Saturday, and so naturally I had to bust open my dies. So there is a quick image of my first dyeing experiment with acid dyes, professional acid dyes, Jacquard acid dyes to be specific. And so I did one of my favorite techniques is to keep the yarn twisted in a hank and then dye the outside of it, and then untwist it, retwist it in another configuration, dye it in another color, and continue in that until I'm happy. I did the 3 primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, just to see what would happen, what kind of mixing there would be. And I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. But this is just a little sneak peek. There will be a video coming out probably in a couple of weeks showing this process. Once it's been dried up, I'll take a couple pictures and share those with you this week as well, just so you can see how that looks. I'm really, really quite impressed with how that turned out. So I'm really quite happy with all of that. Other than that, it's been a lovely day of a holiday. I waited pretty much all day to clean up after last night so that I could kind of relax into the day. I watched some of my favorite podcasts and that came out today to try and keep up. Because as one works throughout the week now, as one does, this one at least, one can't just pop on and watch videos all day. So I did a little of that today. Did get some cleaning up done as I was dyeing some yarn and watching my podcasts all together at the same time. So a little, multitasking and working on my sock. So that's how my day has been. It's been really quite lovely here. I hope you have had a lovely day as well. And I hope your week ahead of you is also a lovely week. May it be filled with loving kindness. So with that, if you enjoy this video, please hit like. If you enjoy the content on this channel, go ahead and subscribe and click the little bell icon so you know when I upload new material. You can find me on Instagram at GreatScott Knitting. You can find me on Ravelry as GreatScott KCMO. And I do have a page on Facebook called GreatScott Knitting, so you can check me out there as well. There'll be links to those things in the show notes. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I know I enjoy sharing a little bit with you, and this is a great opportunity to share on a daily basis for a little bit. So may you have peace in your home and the fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Good night.